And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and the mothership, again, at coalitionradionetwork.com. If this is the first time you're listening to one of our shows, our interviews, our segments, we just ask you to take a moment, if you could, and like and share our social media posts. If you're independent media, social media is, in fact, the mother's milk. It's what gives you the opportunity to rise above the white noise of fake news and, well, all that other nonsense. This is an issue tonight that is very near and dear to my heart. As folks who've listened to the show know, my wife is, in fact, a teacher. Education is the most important part of my life. I'm blessed to have, and in these times, wow, what a relief not to have to be part of this seminal struggle that so many families are being faced with right now in these worst of times. But my daughters are both out of college. So my heart breaks when I see legitimate reasons to keep our children out of school. And that's the debate that needs to happen. It needs to happen in isolation from politics, and it needs to happen in isolation from agendas. It needs to be simply a conversation about the safety of our children, the safety of our teachers, and, of course, the efficacy and the ability to properly teach in this difficult environment. Joining us tonight, she's officially reached repeat offender status. She joined us just a couple of weeks ago on one of our shows. Stephanie Meuse is an East Providence resident, a mother of twin toddlers. Yikes. And a fourth grade teacher at the Learning Community Charter School in Central Falls. She's also a moderator for tonight's conversation of an organization called Rhode Island Parents and Educators for Safe Schools, a Facebook group that started in July 2020 and currently has 15,000 members. And she runs the Safe Return to School RI social media campaign. Stephanie, welcome back to the Coalition. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me again, Pat. It's great to be here.
Well, now, I'm not sure what all the concern and the drama is about. Our president told us, and I spent yesterday, incredibly enough, in one of the nicest days of the year, camped out in front of talking head shows. But he told us, he promised that this disease is, well, it's not really affecting, these children have a great way of, well, they're safe and they're really immune from it, because that's what I've heard experts say, that they're immune from it and that they're not going to get sick and they'll just shake it off. What do you say to that?
Fake news.
Touche.
I hate to even justify that with a response. I think science has proven, especially over the past 2 weeks, when science has tried to quickly catch up and debunk things that Trump is saying or other people are saying about it. I think a lot has come out that's proven that that's just not the case, that children are not immune. Children carry and pass COVID just like adults, and that it is a public health issue to send children back to school.
It strikes me that sometimes it's, I'll use the forest for the trees analogy. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine who has a radio show in town interviewed an author, and they were talking about the great country of Norway. All right, are we all tired yet of hearing about Norway? And this author had written some type of tome, and went on and on and on about it. And, he was talking about comparing Norway to North American cities. And the audience had reached that high level of outrage porn called high dudgeon about it and decrying it. And I called up and I said, by the way, you realize that Norway, in fact, has amongst the lowest population density of any quote-unquote developed nation on the planet. And there was this silence, like, oh, yeah. How important, let's draw a similar analogy. How important is it to take into account the simple fact that children, particularly young children, have been the most protected and secluded amongst our entire population during the first 6 months, if you will, of the COVID crisis, and therefore using anecdotal evidence like, published statistics about who's gotten sick or not are completely invalid because simply our little ones haven't really mixed in society yet. Is it that simple? Because it seems it.
Yeah, it seems that simple, right? So we can't know in the United States because our children here have not been outside in the world like seeing the virus the same way that everybody else has. And a lot of the spikes that we've seen have been since students and children return to summer camp programs and daycare programs over the summer. But I also think that the issue with comparing like to other countries is that right now in Rhode Island, our safeguard or our metric for return is 100 cases per 100,000 people, according to Governor Raimondo. And when we look at places like Denmark that have opened safely, their cases were more at like between 18 and 20 cases per 100,000 people. So it's just like the Norway thing. It's like comparing apples to oranges. It's not the same thing. So yes, people have gone back to school safely in Europe, but also Europe handled the pandemic a lot differently than we did here in the United States.
So let's go over, now we've established sort of benchmarks, let's go over the important issues here. First of all, you've got two distinct populations involved, and we're painting with broad brushes tonight, but for the purpose of the argument, you've got the teachers and you've of course got the children. What are the teachers' concerns? Now, you are a teacher, you're facing this head on. What are the concerns of the teaching population?
Some concerns of the teaching population are that, one, different districts are making teachers feel as though there's no way out next year, that they're not allowed to take a medical leave if they're high risk or have underlying illnesses that make them high risk. The plans rely on these things called stable pods for students, which they're keeping kids in closed groups of 30. But that doesn't apply to teachers. Some high school teachers will still be seeing over 150 students a day, the way that the plans are. And bus drivers will be seeing students from mixed pods. There's really no plan to keep teachers safe.
And we're talking about a diverse group of people as well. Any population can be. I mean, for example, now in the charter school community, what type of range of ages do you see even within a single school?
From just out of graduate school to retirement.
Right.
So like 22 to 60 something. It's a huge age range.
Right. You happen, and again, I'm drawing on anecdotal evidence here, but you've got a number of teachers who in their later stages of their career look to teach in a charter school because of, well, quite frankly, the teaching environment and the positive energy and the focus, if you will, on the children. There, I just said it. And at the same time, for younger teachers, it's a wonderful opportunity to really gain experience on a broad level of issues, teaching, administration. Your hands are literally in everything. So if you're looking to, say, run a school in a few years, someone like yourself, it's a wonderful place to work, isn't it?
I'm not looking to run a school in a few years, but yes, charter schools can be a wonderful place to work.
You say that now, but I'm sorry. I see leadership written all over you, which is why I reached out to you. Sorry.
I appreciate you for saying that.
You're stuck. I had the opportunity. I cover the governor's press conferences every week, and as recently as last week, I asked Angelica Infante-Green what if she had any measure of the status, if you will, of each individual's school departments, the level of construction and remodeling, if you will, for lack of a better term, that was taking place in order to support this quote-unquote pod structure. I'm not looking for you to insult her or anything. I don't want to put you on the spot, but her response to me was that, well, different communities are doing different things. Shouldn't, given the nature of this crisis and the fragility of small children, should the school department, someone, have a comprehensive analysis 20 days before the school year is supposed to start as to where that construction lies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that the burden of that wrong lies completely on Commissioner Infante-Green. She's not the only one not making this decision in a timely manner, and she just got here last year. She's certainly not responsible for the disrepair that our public schools are in across the state.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And in fact, if nothing else, I give her great kudos for reaching out to the Johns Hopkins University and actually opening the door, if you will, and shedding light on what is clearly a tragic situation. But at the same token, if in fact, well, let's talk about the pods. What are some of the obvious failings of this pod system from your perspective as a teacher, as someone who might have to manage the situation?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot. I could talk about the pods for hours. So I hate the term stable pods. I think that it lulls parents who don't have the time or the knowledge of what are to know exactly what that entails, to unpack that term stable pods. I think that it lulls them into the sense that like school is a safe place for your child. We're going to have these stable pods. Um, but you cannot have a stable pod even in an elementary school. So you're talking about a kid who comes to school on a bus with at least 20 other kids who could easily be in 20 other stable pods. They're coming from homes where their parents or siblings are at other schools, in other classrooms, at work, and they're exposed to all of those people. And then they're going to their classroom in this stable pod. And then after school is open, sports are open, students are riding the bus home. There's no such thing as a stable pod. Specialist teachers are, and special ed teachers are rotating between pods. So they're seeing multiple pods a day and then bringing all of that exposure to the different groups. There's not. And just to go back to the press conference last Wednesday, when the gathering was lowered to 15 people, I think the governor was very clear that like it's not a different group of 15 people every day or every time you gather. It's each person having 15 people in their stable pod and those being your people. But why isn't that the same standard that we're holding our schools to?
Right. And so again, not looking to criticize individuals, but is this what do you think the motivation is in this rush to reopen schools? Is it in fact it's a mix? Is it a mixture of the concerns for children, particularly those children in marginalized communities for whom school is a primary source of daily shelter and or food, or is there a political component mixed in?
I think it's both. I think it's expensive, right? It's expensive to feed. Our schools do a lot for kids, right? They feed them, they take care of their mental health services, they take care of their health services. Like our schools offer wraparound services, especially in our low income communities. And to offer all that while school buildings are closed is logistically really hard and also very expensive to fill those gaps. And also you have at the same time, you have this like trying to open the workforce in Rhode Island, which means that those parents need to go to work. Where are their kids going to be, especially when we're in like an affordable childcare crisis in the country? So I think it's political. It's definitely political, right? Everything is political, so there's no way around this being political. But I also think that there's a lot of different voices here, right? Like you have parents who are just like, what am I going to do with my child on August 31st? You have parents who are like, if I can't go to work, I can't pay my bills. What am I supposed to do? Right, the governor is responsible to both parties. Like teachers are constituents and so are parents. And I think it's trying to make both those groups happy and both those groups feel safe. But it is definitely political in nature.
Let's look to the bureaucracy. As someone who teaches at a charter school, do you think that the outreach, and I don't know the answer to this is not a postured question per se, has the outreach from RIDE, has the outreach from the various state bureaucracies, the Department of Health, have they reached out to charter schools? Do you think enough of a conversation has taken place with the folks like yourself, who I'll call the boots on the ground?
So I think there's two levels of communication, right? So there's communication with like our LEAs or the superintendents or the heads of school and charter schools. And I think that they've been in conversation, but the conversation has definitely not extended to teachers or families. So that's sort of been like whatever your district leader, superintendent, or head of school has done to outreach to families and factor those opinions into their plan, then in that way families and teachers have been heard. But we also gave superintendents and district leaders an impossible job to do this summer, which was to listen to teachers and families, take all of their ideas into considerations, and then create this basically impossible plan for school reopening on August 31st.
Yeah, and in addition to the staff, obviously the professional staff at whether it be a charter school or a public school, clearly if there is a group caught in the political crosshairs, it's the superintendents. Superintendents are having to dance to the tune of RIDE, the governor's wishes, as well as you've got this outside, if you will, input from the federal government, who is hell bent for their own political purposes to create this scenario where why would one question the need to go back to school? How damaging has the federal influence been in creating this sort of chaos and confusion about the safety issues?
I wouldn't want to be a district superintendent right now. And I can't really speak to the federal, like how much the federal issues have impacted Rhode Island or district leaders. But I will say about superintendents that I think that it's really important to remember that superintendents serve their communities and their families, and that those are the people that they owe transparency to, um, and that not all not all districts have had equal transparency from their school leaders. Um, yeah, so they don't serve the governor, and they do have to answer to RIDE. But at the end of the day, they serve their families, teachers, and students, and that's who they need to be transparent with. And that has not been the case across districts in Rhode Island.
So tell us about your organization. The beauty of social media, and I'm a huge fan of social media and its ability to foment activism. What was it? What was its birth? How did you get involved? And what type of cross section of the population are involved when you're talking about 15,000 members? That's astonishing in such a short period of time.
Yeah, it really is, and it definitely speaks to what a charged topic this is. So the group was started by a woman named Nicole Dion Casey, and she is a mom in Lincoln, and she teaches in Massachusetts. And she started this group thinking that it was really just going to be This is her quote: 200 moms who maybe sent a few letters or something. And it quickly grew. It must have been like 3,000 people in the first like 3 days, just through people, word of mouth, teachers inviting teacher friends, parents inviting parents friends. And it became this place where there really is representation from across the state. It's teachers and parents together. And I will say that as a Rhode Island educator, it's the first time that I've really seen a statewide effort between teachers and parents to come together and fight for one thing. And that's been really amazing to watch. But it definitely is not something, we're, as they say, we're building the plane as we fly it. It's not something that we intended to start. Just kind of happened.
Is there a general consensus in the group, or is it like so many conversations and taking place around the COVID dinner place? Is it fractured?
It's funny because it's really hard. Like I'm learning, it's really hard, right? There's this organization that somehow I've become one of the faces of that has 15,000 people who I don't know and really haven't talked to all of them. And I'm sitting here trying to come up with like stances and positions without having been elected or being paid by any of them. Like who knows what all of them really believe, but we've really tried to do our due diligence in figuring out what the things are that the group can rally around. And, I felt really self-conscious because we've done a few surveys, and between the surveys, we've had like 700 people respond from inside and outside the group. And I was feeling, like that's not that many people. But then I was reading the NEARI surveys, only surveyed like 400 parents and 300 teachers. And Providence Public Schools only got back like 11% of their parent surveys. So I think at this point we've done a pretty strong survey effort. And about 75% of our members say that they do not feel safe with their children returning to school, or they themselves do not feel safe returning to school as a teacher. And that's split between about 45% of people who just don't feel it's safe and will not return to school or won't return their kids to school, and about 30% of people who say that they have to return their kids to school or they themselves have to return to work, even though they don't believe that it's safe right now.
Wow. Was there any type of survey done or consensus or conversation about the effectiveness of spring distance learning?
I think in general, there was no official survey done, but I don't think we need to do a survey to know that the general consensus is that it was awful and didn't serve students or families very well. And I think that one benefit of this group has been an understanding for parents that are there that distance learning in the spring is not distance learning in the fall, that distance learning in the spring happened to teachers overnight almost. Many teachers were about to head into their spring break, and it was like, just kidding, no vacation. And when you come back, hopefully you know how to teach online. Very little professional development. it was just kind of thrown together at the last second, and it was largely a failure. It was a success in the way that it kept communities engaged with one another, but it was definitely not like an educational success. I don't think anybody would claim that.
Now, you teach at the primary level. Um, when it comes to the basics, very often folks say, from grade say 1 to maybe second or third grade, you learn to read, and from grade say third and fourth on, you read to learn. Now, you teach at a charter school. Is it during periods like this? Is it important really to just stick to the basics? What type of course work and what type of overview or what type of approach did you take during this spring? And what would you recommend going forward if, in fact, we have to go back to distance learning?
I think nobody knows, right? Nobody knows the answer to that question, and I don't think anybody is going to know until distance learning is behind us and we see the effects of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think those are the conversations that we need to have. So I have my personal feelings about it, right? Which is that it's just the basics, and that I'm not. I think content standards are like a whole nother thing that I could talk about for a really long time. I don't feel that they're very important, even when we're not distance learning. Not skill standards, but like content standards. So I definitely think that a return to distance learning means like we're prioritizing things that have the most impact on students, and are the most transferable to distance learning. But that said, like there's no agreement there. There's no research there because this is a brand new thing that's never been done before. So I think those are the conversations that we need to be allowing teachers and schools the time to have before school starts. And all of this effort at literally schools in Rhode Island right now are spending their entire summer moving furniture out of classrooms and building plexiglass forts around students. And it's just insane to me that that's what is happening when we have all of these other important conversations to have with one another. And
Right.
it's also just so sad to see our resources spent on things like that.
But in a sense, hasn't that been the way since what I'll call the Johns Hopkins crisis was revealed to us, or revealed to some? A lot of us already knew what was going on in Providence schools. It was the members of the administration at a variety of levels, or as they say, in denial. The response to the Johns Hopkins crisis was much more about fresh coats of paint and dealing with broken lighting and flooding and beaten rooms, which of course is critically important, but less about the more difficult challenge, which was curriculum, priorities, how to work with children who are, what my generation would call ESL. But that always seems to be the way. I mean, anytime, at the high school level, there's a budget cut, tell folks that you're going to, kill football, and, you've got, parades through town with honking horns. Tell folks that you want to talk about the math curriculum, and, you can hear the crickets. I mean, given the crisis that we're in, and given the tough test scores that these students have, and I'm not here to assign blame for that at all, but it's a fact of life that children across Rhode Island from a variety of settings have just tough test scores, and reading is a real issue. Doesn't it just defy common sense that we would try to continue to reproduce a sophisticated classroom environment with a sophisticated curriculum, when in fact it just screams like almost an opportunity just to get back to basics?
Yeah, I mean, and even if we weren't returning to distance learning, even if this were a normal school year, in light of everything else that happened, I still think that I would be in favor of burning it all down and starting over again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but especially since we're doing distance learning, I think that there's the sense of like what we did in the past didn't serve us that well anyway. So why are we trying to mimic it, or why are we trying to save it? Um, yeah, I also think like in terms of people not caring about there being a conversation about math, right? That to me is the job of the governor and RIDE and like the people who are elected officials to make caring about schools important. I think one of our main points in this group, the Safe Return to School RI, has been like this is not just an issue for educators. This is an issue for everyone in Rhode Island. Like if Providence sends kids back to school and Central Falls sends kids back to school, like that's bad for everyone. But
Mm-hmm.
this isn't the first time that things happening in Providence and Central Falls have been bad for the state of Rhode Island. Like we have to help people care about that. We have to make caring about that seem fun and exciting and important, because we need people to care about stuff like that. And the painting the buildings before addressing the curriculum, like that's such a hard thing in school. Teachers always say you got to Maslow before you bloom, right? So you have to take care of basic needs before you can do any important content teaching. And one, that's going to be really important in distance learning. And two, that's important in restructuring and reforming schools. School buildings are important, but also there's also a sense in education that you have to do everything at once, that you have to do like the important community building, and you have to do the teaching the skill set and all of that, because kids only do fourth grade or fifth grade or sixth grade one time. So it's a hard thing. I can't imagine being Providence Public Schools right now in the year after the Johns Hopkins report and then having this happen on top of that. It's definitely a mess.
So let's get down to it. Your organization has come up with a list of, I won't call them demands, but a list, an approach to how you would like to see things going forward. And we also have an event coming up. So if you can, just go through the list in as much detail as you want, as to what the priorities from your perspective and your organization's perspective should be.
So I think that luckily, we're on the same page as the NEARI and the RIFT, in that we think that the biggest priority is just to delay the beginning of school and also to return to 100% distance learning in the beginning of the school year. We definitely see eye to eye on that. That seems to make the most sense. But also our requests, they also reflect things that parents are concerned about. So things like we're asking for like utility moratoriums, flexible unemployment, eviction moratoriums, like things that will help our families stay home and support their kids. If we return to distance learning, or hopefully when we return to distance learning, we're asking for like free lunch programs to continue outside of school buildings. I keep hearing the governor say that it's so important that kids get back to school because that's where they eat, when she herself is the person who could put food in their hands wherever they are in Rhode Island. So we just need that to happen. The mental health services that happen in school, we're asking for plans to make sure that those reach families where they're needed. So our demands or asks go a little bit beyond what the NEARI and RIFT is asking for, but we're definitely in line with the 100% return to distance learning as being the first and most important thing.
Now, you've got an event coming up.
We do, on Friday.
Tell us all about it.
Okay, so on Friday, we are delivering a petition to the State House. I have to tell you, I had to look up what it meant to deliver a petition. So we're delivering a petition to the State House. And we're also going to have a rally and a speaking program on the State House steps on Friday at 3 p.m. And there'll be an accompanying car rally around the State House at the same time. We're going to speak up nice and loud so that the governor hears us. We're hoping to preempt her decision on August 17th, but it seems like that will be delayed a little bit. So maybe we'll have time for another rally before that happens.
And this is all about having a conversation. I mean, your group has been a very effective deliberative body for an organization that literally didn't exist months ago. And isn't that really the crux of it? Information sharing, a deliberative approach to a problem that has no good solutions. I mean, we can all accept that at this point. There are no good answers. Folks have exhausted themselves trying to find ways to make this better, haven't they?
Mm-hmm. It's all bad. There are just so many plans out there. Like, what if we had tents? What if we got, there's a lot of hoop jumping and like very creative innovation and trying to make the situation not bad, but it's bad. There's no way to make it not bad. But yeah, it's a special skill of teachers, right? To bring people together and get a conversation moving in a singular direction. And I think that's been one of our strengths, is that we have so many people who are good at that on board. We're gonna see where that takes us.
So in a nutshell, your organization wants a delay to the return to in-person education. What is your take on the pods? I mean, are you at this point saying you just want to dismiss that as an ineffective way, or are you looking to modify that, or how do we approach the pods?
I think the pods are like the 70th step, right? So I think that we're trying to start with step one, which is that we're not in school and
Mm-hmm.
we don't agree that 100 cases per 100,000 people is a stringent enough safeguard. So, like, that's the first step. Like, we don't even want to talk about anything to do with being back in the building until we agree on a safeguard. You know, like Dr. Phillips, who is the infectious disease person at George Washington University, has said 75 cases per 100 people. Oregon is going back at 10 cases per 100,000 people. So I don't know how Rhode Island, we've asked and have not heard how Rhode Island came up with this number of 100 cases per 100,000. My guess is because it's like 8 cases lower than, I mean, 8 cases lower than what Providence has right now, which is convenient. Um, but so we're asking for more stringent safeguards, and like we don't even want to talk about the other stuff until those things are put into place. um, because that's the thing, is that if you have this solution that seems to work, it it draws people's attention away from the important conversation that needs to be had. Like, it doesn't matter if the stable pods are 15 kids or 30 kids. It doesn't matter if the deaths right now are 6 feet apart or 3 feet apart. Like, we have almost 200 cases per 100,000 people in Central Falls. Like, that's not the conversation. I don't want to have a conversation about stable pods at all. Like, I just want to talk about what we can do to bring our case numbers down and how low they need to be before we can even discuss a return to in-person learning.
As an educator and a parent, how helpful would it be if the state finally just had well, down south they call it a come to Jesus meeting, and really explained, spare us the bit about washing our hands. We get that. Spare us the ongoing conversation about masks. At least some of us get that. But simply an in-depth conversation, because we're all adults, about how they've arrived at these numbers. How important would that be to you? I mean, whether it be the 15 in a bar or the 11 p.m. or more importantly, the how many cases per thousand, merit a return to in-person education. Do you think it's time they just sat there if it took an afternoon, take the damn afternoon and explain to us so that as adults we can feel like we're making something of a decision based on some rational analysis of all these numbers?
Yes, I mean, one of the goals of the group has just been trying so hard to open up the lines of communication between the commissioner, the governor, and ourselves. And I don't even mean like our organization, I just mean between parents and families and teachers and the decision makers at large. That just it seems like it has fallen on deaf ears. So there's the promise of like these virtual town halls that started that are just discussing the reopening of schools, which run like infomercials for returning to schools. It's just these cherry picked pediatricians or public health officials who are like, it's great, it'll be fine. Like, just go back to school, it'll be great. And that's not like, she had the virtual town hall last week. She said she was going to take questions and comments from people who were commenting on the Facebook stream. Literally one person got a comment or question answered in the 32-minute town hall. So Uprise actually just published today. The group has a list of like 30 something questions that have been either sent to Dr. Fauci, who's going to be her guest this Thursday, or the governor herself that we just haven't received answers to. And this list of questions is something that we're hoping that she'll see, and we're hoping that people can get answers to, because yeah, we just need to have that. We're tired of hearing the not answers to the questions that we're asking.
I know how that goes. Every Wednesday at 1:00, I get not answers to the questions that I've asked. And I focus a lot on the economic issues surrounding this crisis, less so perhaps education. But that statement is largely universal at this point. We're dealing with generalizations and talking points. They're very politely delivered in the most pleasant form imaginable in a beautiful setting at Veterans Auditorium, but in terms of actual substance, what they're going to do and what it really means, not so much.
I think the closest we've heard to like an off-the-cuff answer is when Commissioner Infante-Green just said that it was a logistical nightmare. I think that's the closest they've come to really being candid about the situation.
Yeah, and again, my one of my central arguments this entire time, and I'd love your reaction to this, is the late great Vincent A. Buddy Cianci had a term for it. He said, "Time to come Coco," which was kind of a street slang for, just tell us the facts. And the absence of the facts has created so much confusion, so much unnecessary drama. At this point, people are tense. They're exhausted. A lot of them, a lot of folks are just somehow heretofore thought impossible. We're broker than we were. We're angrier than we are. And so hiding the facts from us, has it helped at all?
No, I mean, maybe it helped for like 2 weeks over the summer when people just kind of thought that we wouldn't have to talk about reopening schools because maybe we would just be in a place where it could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think mid-July, people quickly started to realize that that wasn't the case. And I like to say in the group that we came together in panic. We need to stick together for progress because that's really where people were entering this conversation is just panic. Like I haven't, still people are panicking, right? I haven't heard anything from my school leaders. I have no idea what the plan is next year. I have no idea what's expected of me. I have no idea what to expect from my kid. At this point, the opaqueness has just caused panic. And it continues to like there's still no transparency around like all families will have the option of distance learning, but now there's this difference between distance learning and virtual learning, and you can opt into distance learning but you can't opt out again until January, but that isn't legally binding, and in some districts it's you have to opt in for the whole year. Like it's a lot of just like smoke and mirrors to make things seem like they are under control or like they have a legit plan when it's pretty clear that we don't have a plan.
Yikes. Well, the one question I have to ask you, how much do you miss the kids?
Oh my God. The most. I miss my kids the most. I continued to teach over the summer. I had like 7 of my same kids for summer school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really hard to say goodbye to this group. I think every teacher has said or expressed this in some way, but like the magic of the school year happens in March to June. Like that's when you see a return on all the investments you've made in the beginning of the school year. And it's when you really see your class come together. You see them grow, you see them be ready for the next grade. And to miss all of that is heartbreaking. It really is. And yeah, it's really, I don't think there's a teacher out there who doesn't miss being with the kids every day.
It's interesting. My wife always takes a picture of the class the first day of school, and then she takes a picture of the class the last day of school. But a lot of teachers do it, right? And for the teacher, though, that has special significance because she can look at each one of those children years later and understand where they started, where they ended, the challenges in between. And one of the most heartbreaking parts of the picture this year was you had, all these, kooky, noodly little kids in a huddle at the beginning of September. And then you had pictures of these children in a Zoom conference room, a screenshot. And that just spoke to everyone who saw the picture. It just really, really spoke to them, just what the loss is and how we have to figure this out. Because ultimately, it's the oldest line in the book, but it really is about the kids. And kids are great. All kids are great kids. All kids have superpowers. It's just up for us as adults to find them and cultivate them. And
Absolutely.
we just need to get back doing that. Let's go over this one more time because I want to make sure people who haven't managed to find your site, even though at this point you have most of the state, in some form or another. Now, again, as someone who works in social media myself, the ability to kudos to all of you who are sort of managing, coordinating, I don't know, herding the cats on all this because, again,
it's a smaller group than you might think.
It usually is, but the maturity, the level of information that's available through your group is astonishing. So many of these groups often sort of just descend into chaos, and quite frankly, the public service that all of you are providing speaks to the fact that the state's not, and I mean that. Let's leave that on a positive note. So where can folks find your page again? What's the full name of it? How can they find it on the Facebook?
On Facebook, the group is called Rhode Island Parents and Educators for Safe Schools. You can find us on Twitter at Safe Return RI. You can also join our conversations every Thursday. We live tweet the governor's live stream about school reopenings. We use the hashtag Safe Return to School RI. So you can find us there every Thursday at 3 p.m. And you can find us on Instagram at Safe Return to School RI.
All right. And the event, what time does the event start Friday? Is there a central meeting point?
There is. So there's two meeting points. One meeting point for the car rally is at 2:45 at the Clifford Street lot in downtown Providence. And then the in-person rally, the meeting place is 2:45 in front of the State House on the lawn there.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for everything that you're doing. It's truly the work of the Lord. Again, I can't imagine as a parent and having been, having somehow managed to find a way to get two kids through, through college without these kind of social media based resources on so many levels across the state, where we would be. So your work is well worth it. I'm going to try to be there Friday, and I'm trying to spread the word. It would be really cool if there's massive turnout occurred with people of goodwill who are looking to do nothing more than ensure the safety of their children, their much loved teaching staff, and also putting state leaders on a positive basis on note, that we're watching.
Yes.
I'll leave you with one of the most poignant moments that I've had with this whole period of time. You talk about missing kids. In Bristol Warren, the school district there, the bus drivers all got together and organized a video where because a lot of these, folks who drive buses and are bus monitors, they spend a lot of time with these kids. Sometimes it's an hour or so a day plus. And so they build their own affinity with them. So they put together a video, wishing the kids well because they never had a chance to say goodbye at the end of the year. And when you see that and you see the connection that takes place between the entire range of professional staff that works so hard at trying to do the best they can with the resources they're handled for our children here in Rhode Island, it does bring a tear to your eye, and it shows you just why you folks work as hard as you do. So, Rhode Islanders need to suck it up, Buttercup, show up on Friday, make some phone calls, reach out, join the group, offer to volunteer, offer to help, and because it is for our kids. So, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me again, Pat. It was great to chat with you.
Hope I catch up with you for a couple of quick minutes on Friday. We'll see you then. All right?
Absolutely. See you there.
All right, that is Stephanie Meuse. She is an East Providence resident. She's a mom of twin tots, as we call them here, a fourth grade teacher at the Learning Community Charter School in Central Falls, and she's a moderator for Rhode Island Parents Educators for Safe Schools, a Facebook group, and they really span all of social media that started just in July, and has 15,000 plus members, all advocating for one simple goal. Not so simple to get there, but the one simple goal, which is somehow to safely provide the best education for children possible in the coming school year. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course our mothership, coalitionradionetwork.com. If you're listening to this for the first time, or you hear this in the multiple repeats we're going to do this week to get the word out, we'd ask you just take a moment and follow and like both Stephanie's organization on social media as well as ours. Our ability to reach out to you and connect on issues that are this critical is based on our connection to you via social media, our ability to transcend, if you will, the white noise, the fake news that's out there and everywhere. So folks like us who really want to provide that sort of outrage porn-free channel of information and conversation can do so. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow night.